$100,000 piano for the Air Force Chief of Staff. You paid for that. You know how there's been this refrain, this drumbeat, this mantra, this obsession, this propaganda around Donald Trump and the Republican Party being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, being very concerned about fraud, waste, and abuse. After all, they invited Elon Musk to come and steal your personal financial data, giving him access to all kinds of databases that he is not authorized, was not and is not authorized to have. Who knows what he's going to do with that data? But this entire refrain about fraud, waste, and abuse, and we're spending too much money and we need to allocate our dollars more wisely is just a lie. It's just propaganda. It's just intended to give them cover to steal from you, from me, from we the people. The New Republic, I'm going to read a little bit from this headline, but this is a remarkable story that hopefully catches fire, especially leading into the midterms, because our Pentagon, which is already flush with cash like no other defense agency anywhere on the planet, is now, in an effort to spend all the money they didn't spend at the end of the year, just blowing through nearly $100 billion on lobster and crab and all kinds of luxurious spending that they don't need. The same people that claim they want to do good by you as a taxpayer are now just being maniacs. Here's the headline. Pete Hegseth blew billions on fruit basket stands, chairs, and crab. The Defense Department went on a $93 billion spending spree in 2025. Imagine what could be done with $93 billion. Nearly $100 billion, nearly a tenth of $1 trillion on lobster fucking tails. The Pentagon spent more money in September, the end of the 2025 fiscal year, than it had in any other year since 2008. But a good chunk of the budget wasn't used for anything that could be considered a pertinent military expense. The Defense Department burned through $93 billion that month alone. That month alone. September of 2025, Pete Hegseth spent nearly $100 billion. And when you learn of all of the things they wasted it on, you should be enraged. Signing checks left and right in order to dry up its congressionally allocated budget, according to a recent analysis by government watchdog Open the Books. There is pressure to spend. If federal agencies don't use the entirety of their budgets by the end of the fiscal year, then they lose access to that cash forever, potentially putting themselves in a situation where they have to request a reduced budget the following year. But the Pentagon's long list of luxuries is hardly defensible. Some of the frivolous September purchases made under Secretary Pete Hegseth's stewardship include a $98,329 Steinway & Sons grand piano for the Air Force Chief of Staff's home. $100,000 piano for the Air Force Chief of Staff. You paid for that. What military justification could there be? Does the Air Force Chief of Staff need to relax playing a little piano after a long day of bombing Iranian girls' schools? Makes you wonder. $5.3 million for Apple devices such as the new iPad, and an astronomical amount of shellfish, including $2 million for Alaskan king crab and $6.9 million worth of lobster tail. Lobster tail is apparently a favorite of Hegseth's Pentagon. The department spent more than $7.4 million total on the luxury item in March, May, June, and October. $7.5 million worth of lobster tail. Lobster's okay, but come on. In other pricey food purchases, the government decided to drop $15.1 million for ribeye steak. Again, just in September. $15 million on ribeye steaks in September of 2025, while Americans struggle to pay for groceries, while eggs were out of control expensive, while milk is out of control expensive, while beef is out of control expensive. $15 million in ribeyes in September of 2025. $124,000 for ice cream machines, and $139,224 on 272 orders of donuts. But they're concerned about fraud, waste, and abuse. They're concerned about cutting food assistance to poor children. Tell me again, Pete Hegseth, how you're concerned about these things. Weeks later, millions of Americans would lose their SNAP benefits amid the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. More still stand to lose eligibility to food assistance programs thanks to a Republican crusade that added stricter work requirements to the program, piling on paperwork and documentation mandates. One of the largest bulk expenditures was just for furniture, for which the Pentagon decided to shell out $225 million. That included $12,000 for fruit basket stands and checks totaling more than $60,000 for Herman Miller recliners. All in all, the agency spent more on furniture in 2025 than it had in over a decade. Let that sink in. In 2025 alone, just one single year, the first year that Donald Trump is back in office in his second term, they spent more on furniture in that year, last year, than in all of the previous decade, than a decade's worth of furniture. $250 million on furniture. In the last five, by the way, if you've never been in the Pentagon, most of you probably have not been inside the Pentagon, it is drab. It is not a luxurious space. It would be very out of place to have a bunch of Herman Miller recliners laying around inside the dusty, dank Pentagon. For those of you in the comments who do know what the Pentagon's like inside, back me up on this. In the past 5 days of September alone, the department blew through $50.1 billion on just grants and contracts. For context, only 9 other countries spend that much on the entirety of their defense budget per year. This is, it is hard to put into words just how wasteful this shit is. In the last 5 days of September, our Pentagon spent more than the 9 other countries, than all other countries except for 9, what they spend on defense in an entire year. Our Pentagon spent in the last 5 days of September. Holy shit. It's also more than total military budgets of Canada and Mexico combined. The federal government had a $1.8 trillion deficit in 2025, just for your information. $1.8 trillion. And for those of you who do find it naturally difficult to wrap your brain around that kind of money, that's $1,800 billion. That's our deficit. You know, the good stewards of the taxpayer dollars and wanting to balance the budget. We got to root out the fraud. We got to make sure old people don't have Medicaid. We got to make sure poor kids, hungry kids don't have the food. We can't afford all that, but we can afford $50.1 billion to be spent the last 5 days of September alone. Almost $100 billion. That's a whole bunch of lobster tails. Carry this with you into the midterms. Talk about this to your family and friends and acquaintances and coworkers, people you're sitting next to at the bus stop. Talk about this to them. They do not care. Everything is a lie. Everything is projection. They want to take care of themselves. They want to live luxuriously. They want to work luxuriously while they take away from the most vulnerable in our country. hypocrisy that actually harms people. It's not just a concept here. It's not a conversation piece. Real human children, American children, go without. So Pete Hegseth can have his fucking lobster tails. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. Let's have it in the comments below the video. You can also call the voicemail line, 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me daily@dollemore.com.